Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I'll start by just sharing the agenda here. I think everyone can see that. But to just walk us through the agenda briefly, we're going to go over the education cross-cutting pathways today. We'll be using a template. There's a PDF version online, and then for members a part of this group to edit this document, it's on our SharePoint, and I'll go over how to access that. But we'll similar process to the other task groups and subcommittees so far. We'll be reviewing existing strategies, pathways, and actions for education, and identifying new opportunities to work on that today. But we'll first start just by going through the scope of education cross-cutting issue, how to access the template, and then we'll kind of dive into at the end the work of reviewing existing strategies and then identifying new opportunities. And then we'll have public comment at the end. Any questions on the agenda? Okay, great. So I will show the template. Are you guys able to see that? Awesome. Okay. So for folks not familiar with this template and process, what we have here are the this is like just showing you the template that we'll be using today. We'll be going over how like what's existing here. We'll be making decisions of revising actions, revising strategies, keeping as is, removing or combining, and revising language. And this again falls under education, so it's coming from various subcommittees, but falling under that umbrella. But before we dig into that work, I wanted to open it up because there's been, I think, discussion around some subcommittees and in our office as well about the scope of the education pathway. And I just wanted to open up to the group to see if, and I think Jane's on now too, thoughts on education itself as the scope or broadening it.
I mean, I can just jump in quickly for cross-sector. I'll say we haven't spent a lot of time talking about education except flagging the need for it. And I think the most significant place that our recommendations have kind of talked about education is really for the need for like the energy navigators or energy coaches. But we haven't talked a lot about education more broadly. Essentially punting it to this group.
Thanks, Jane.
Yes, sorry to be late, everybody. And I was kind of coming into the end of your question, Liz. But I know like Sophie's here and I'm here because I'm interested in talking a little bit about this pathway and the work within this section as thinking about climate communications, because we don't really have a really great place to talk about like our communications and engagement work in the plan as currently structured. So have been thinking about like, could we broaden this component of the work to actually highlight that? Because I think we all know how important that work is and how much time and effort it takes and resources. And this is obviously the I think that, well, no, the last time the EJ law was part of a cross-cutting theme, I think, in the last plan. So that's not really represented anywhere right now, but obviously that was where there was components of work around community engagement. So just trying to think about if this is still aptly named, or if we want to revise it or reframe it before we actually were looking at what's in it. And then I'll just say, I'm here just to help support Liz and help support all of you, but this is really obviously your work with respect to the council.
I would appreciate if we could just maybe if you could just identify who's actually on this group as far as subcommittee members and who are just participating as kind of spectators or members. Just, I don't know everyone on this call, so it would just be helpful for me to kind of understand what's going on. And I can start.
great.
My name is Billy Coster. I'm with my agency, Natural Resources, and I'm a co-chair of the Agriculture and Ecosystem Subcommittee.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Billy. I wasn't on at the beginning of the meeting, so I wasn't sure sort of what's already happened, but folks who should be on this call, we can go through now, but should only be, Liz and I are here as just state staff to support at the beginning of this, since the Climate Action Office agreed to help facilitate and put forward the work for the cross-cutting issues. But this, the only people on the call should really be representatives from the 3 substantive subcommittees. So yeah, good. So everybody can know who each other are and what you're bringing forward to the conversation today. So, and Sophie's here too from our office because, again, I thought it would be great to broaden the, or consider with all of you if education is the right framing for this theme. Melissa, popcorn over to you.
Yeah, so Melissa Bailey, I'm the director of the State Energy Office at the Public Service Department and co-chair of the Cross-Sector Mitigation Subcommittee. And we didn't have other folks from our subcommittee volunteer, so I am covering the education efforts for cross-sector. So Katie, you want to be next for introductions?
Sure. Hi, my name is Katie Clark. I am here as two hats. I'm here as a concerned citizen that cares about climate change and was trying to find an opportunity to get involved. And then the other reason that I'm here is that I'm working on a couple of projects to help develop short-term certificate programs in climate change communication and environmental data science. And it may seem like, Jane, it might be a best use of my time to actually maybe email you directly for, to just kind of have a little brainstorm conversation with you.
Yeah, Katie, can I just clarify? You work for the Agency of Education, is that correct?
No, I don't work for any agency.
Okay. Oh yeah, that might make
a public meeting. I was gonna
yeah.
ask the premise of it.
Of course, it's a public meeting. That's so interesting. You totally. This is me coming between way too many meetings, and I'm sorry that. And Billy, I appreciate you bringing it up because it's me just forgetting it's a public meeting. But thanks for yes. You should feel free to observe today, Katie, if you'd like, and then also happy to take some feedback from you offline, and there'll be a chance for comment today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Alice, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? And I apologize for being a little bit late. I was finishing up an email on another issue I had today. I'm Alice Peel. I'm on the Rural Resources and Adaptation Subcommittee, and I'm also chairing the Public Health Task Force. I'm also a Waitsfield Planning Commissioner and a few other things that I seem to be getting volunteered for, but I think it's the Public Health Task Force that immediately zeroed in on communicating public health issues, how we're doing it now and how we can do it better, making sure we're not leaving out marginalized people. We've looked at the social equity issue like immediately and starting to figure out how we could do things like communicate and reach out to homeless communities, etc. So we're kind of the first one. I think we just immediately went straight towards communications and some education, especially getting it down to the town level, to municipalities. Um,
And Spencer, I think Spencer's a member of the public, unless I'm wrong.
Yep, just member of the public listening in. Thanks.
Thanks, Spencer. Sorry that I sort of had the forgetfulness of how we're conducting these meetings. We actually are doing some stakeholder input sessions in the coming weeks that are not public, so I just forgot, and I kind of thought of this as a task group meeting, so sorry for that. But thank you for everybody from the subcommittees who are here to advance this component of the work. And Liz, did you already walk through the agenda for today? Again, I was late, so I missed how we kicked off the meetings. Thanks.
Yeah, I walked through it, and also I have the agenda in the chat if anyone else wants to look again. But yeah, the first item really is to, yeah, define the scope, and whether or not folks would like to broaden it to what you're proposing here, and then we kind of go into the template side of things. Yeah, Sophie.
Quick question following up on our introductions. And I think Jane introduced me, but hello everybody, I'm Sophie. It's nice to meet you if I haven't met you before. Is there somebody from Agency of Education who will be participating in the task groups?
So there are multiple folks from AOE are invited, but they weren't able to attend today. Hopefully they'll be able to join our second meeting.
That was an effort just for the folks on from the other subcommittees, an effort from Sophie and through others when we were developing sort of the progress report for the Climate Council on actions within the different sections of the CAP. Sophie, Colin, we reached out to different agencies to sort of have them review actions that were assigned to them, and sort of indicate any progress made so that we could let the council know where progress had been made and where it was lacking. And there were a few agencies in particular, AOE, Agency of Education, that were like, oh, what's the climate action plan? We weren't involved. Some of these components of the work, which speak directly to our agency, would be better written or informed with AOE staff at the table. And this is the challenge that you all know of, like throughout the climate action plan. It's often strategies and actions that are written sort of by folks somewhat in consultation with state staff, but not always. And that when writing recommendations for state agencies, be better to try to frame those in ways that collaborate with those agencies if possible. So we thought having AOE here, sort of like the way on the workforce group, we also invited Department of Labor staff, I know, to participate in that, who, even though they're not involved in the Climate Council process.
Yes, that makes sense. I don't know that a lot of these actually touch on formal education, but a couple of them certainly do. So I'm not exactly sure how you want to use this time, Liz, but I guess I would really benefit from understanding like what our charge is. There's a limited number of actions on this tracker, many of which indicate they're either being implemented or advancing. So are we expected to go through every single one of these and recommend kind of revisions to the action? Or are we just here to try to identify like what the priorities or gaps are amongst what's here already? What are we trying to accomplish? Is this a good time to answer that
My
question?
understanding. Yeah. So I mean, this is the kickoff. This is the first one of these, but I don't see these any differently, but we should talk about this. And I'm sorry that you kind of all are the guinea pigs for the first one of these meetings. But as Billy alluded to, the steering committee, the charge for these cross-cutting task groups, for better lack of a term, was intended to be 2 discrete meetings with the Climate Action Office supporting some work in between, to first and foremost sort of act the way that task groups are in support of subcommittees, which is to review the actions to date, see if you want to revise, keep, remove, and then based on once we all have a good understanding of what's in from last time, decide if there is any gaps or recommended additional pathway strategies or actions that we would want to see in that plan. And for this one, the conversation that Liz was floating as I joined earlier, there was this first question that it would be helpful to say, like, education, is that something right from the start that we want to acknowledge isn't like the right flavor for a cross-cutting chapter in the climate action plan? Should we broaden it, or is it fine as is? Just leave it as education, as climate education, and then review the work that was in the first plan to date based around that sort of charge of this section of the plan. So hopefully that's helpful, but yes, I do think there's our goal, just like the way the task groups have been sort of like putting their head down and going through, is to actually go through each one and just sort of say, keep, remove, revise, and then from there, like, have a better understanding of the work and propose if there's any large gaps. Does that sound right for everybody? I mean, that is my understanding of what was asked by the steering committee.
Sure.
That all makes sense to me, Jane. I almost would push your last question about like, is education the right topic for like after we complete our initial cut through the actions? And talk about potentially broadening or not. Yeah. And also, did the steering committee identify education as a cross-cutting pathway, or is this a carryover from the last plan? I'm just a little lost in the process.
Yeah. So really, you're lost. It's why I can't tell why. It's like crystal clear. Yes. These are carryovers from the last plan. There were, I think there were 5, right? Look, last time, Liz, I should know this off the back of my hand, but we had cross-cutting pathways, and then we had some cross-cutting themes last time in the last plan. But these are carryovers from the last plan, the titles, the sections, and we decided to do away with the themes, one of which you'll remember went to sort of cross-sector, which was building codes, and the other was environmental justice or the environmental justice law, because the only thing that was in there was pass an environmental justice law. And that moved forward. So these are the 3 that were there last time. I would imagine if the council chose to do so, that's not the charge of our groups, but they could say these 3 don't represent like all that needs to be done as cross-cutting, and they might choose to expand, but I don't think we need to hypothesize on that right now. That can be the Climate Council's job.
Got it. Yep.
Okay. Do folks generally support Melissa's, like, let's figure out what the heck is in here first and go through and then decide if education makes the most sense, or if we're seeing something that would cause us to sort of change the sort of charge or title of this group? And by group, I just mean group of actions.
Speaking for
Yes,
myself,
that sounds right to me.
Sophie, go ahead too, sorry.
yeah, thanks, Ally. Sorry to overlap you. I've read like just one of the strategies, but not all of them together. So speaking for myself, it would be helpful if we're planning on going through them and looking at them all together. I think that would be helpful before considering the scope question.
Okay. I'll stop talking now and let Liz, I'll let you facilitate through going through the actions and see where folks have comments and stuff.
Okay, great. So we'll start it at the beginning. And again, we have, as we go through these, we have multiple options that you could see here. It's a very similar process other subcommittees and task groups have been going through. But yeah, we could just go through them one by one if that works for everyone. Yeah, so to start, let's look at pathway 19. And again, these are going to be very different because they're coming from various subcommittees, so they're not going to all sound similar. So we have adaptation here. Do folks want to take a minute to just kind of look through this? Any thoughts on 19 here for adaptation? Sustain, restore, and enhance health and function of Vermont's lands and water to help both natural and human communities adapt to climate change.
And just a reminder about how this worked last time, and I'll be curious, we're gonna have, what I'd like to think is the benefit of like pulling together a comprehensive draft well before the July 1st deadline this time. So, but there was literally like an assimilation of, pathways, like, and in this case, this pathway probably, I would imagine, has strategies and actions that still fall within the ag and eco bucket. And this was just a strategy that came over into education, which it's funny in and of itself, but anyway.
Yeah,
So-
and there can be also like, there might be some overlap with workforce development here, because as you look into underneath the actions here, it's around training. So there could also be a discussion of like, would this like to stay in education as well? Or do folks feel like it belongs elsewhere? Yeah, any thoughts? Feel free to type in the chat or just hop in for this first bunch here with 19.
So again, if like the third one that's being implemented, are we even like talking about that since it's underway?
Yeah, we are still with implementing, we're still acknowledging it and keeping it in, so even though it's happening. And the prioritization of these happen later. But right now we are looking at this as well.
Yeah, Billy, we tried kind of, you might remember that we tried with the steering committee and the council to say if it's completed or being implemented, could we take those sort of off the table and like move those to like a progress section of the cap and not keep those as sort of active actions? And the climate council said no. That the being implemented should still be front and center in the plan, or that's how we've been treating it, that with that they might need more resources or you don't want to let it go, or but our definition, I had thought advancing and no action taken should be the ones that like the council spent their time on. Or we had recommended that as an approach that they could take, I should say, but they decided to leave being implemented as like active actions. So yes, but if it's being implemented, I think that you're probably right. For the sake of this exercise, just probably say keep, and we don't need to worry about revising unless.
Yeah, that it's similar to a format that I had to go through for the local hazard mitigation plan for the town. We had to identify new, nothing being done, and we had to identify being implemented. And those were requirements of hazards that we identified, new hazards that we thought needed to be added. And what I'm seeing here is, it seems to me that what we've got here is a snapshot of the education pathway that should be first identified within the particular subcommittee's goals and tasks. So in other words, what this first section tells me is that the ag subcommittee has identified the need to bring understanding and explanations and education directly to the farmers so that they understand why we need to do this for climate change. And here's what we're suggesting that you do. I mean, you're trying to get, not only educate, you're also trying to get buy-in here. So I would expect to see this in the subcommittees, tasks and goals. And this template here, whether it's called education or public assistance or I don't know what else I would think of. This really distills it and has it stand out for the Climate Action Council to look at and say, well, here's the education piece of this, or the funding we need. If we're asking for funding, we can go right here and see the funding, so that they don't have to go through every single committee to get to what things are saying here. Understanding, funding, UVM, extension. Get farmers and large farmers, landowners in for workshops, etc. You know, why would you try to remove a berm on your land to reconnect to the floodplain, which actually is a good idea, because then the floodplain can act as it needs to and help reduce the effects of the severe flooding we're seeing. You know, this is why you'd want to do it. Or
I wonder, so what I'm hearing you say, and as you were talking, Alice, I opened the spreadsheet myself so I could sort of scroll through all of the pathway strategies and actions that were consolidated into the education section. What I'm hearing you suggest as an approach, which maybe our office or the steering committee or someone should have thought of separately, but this is interesting to me because they are all very applicable to what feels like different subcommittees, bodies of work. So they are all coming up. I think they're all ag and eco probably. And they just got pulled out of ag and eco and put into education. But I hear what you're saying is, I wonder if rather they're, in order to make something like an education cross-cutting issue more meaningful, that there's some sort of like give back of these to where they belong with the subcommittee task groups working on on farmer resilience or natural working lands resilience or XYZ that's listed here, and ask more across the board that as the public health task group or the building thermal task group, as you're flagging issues that or actions that are related to education in your sector, that somehow that's noted in a column, and there's more of this is just a proposal, more of a narrative around sort of like education and outreach as key to the success of all climate action, and that specific strategies and actions can be found throughout the climate action plan with respect to their sectors, and a holistic approach should be taken to think about how to maximize sort of efficiencies in that educational approach, and also not be in conflict with each other. But here it almost feels like I don't actually see the theme across the board on education here. They all feel more like specific to actually the working land sector, which is both education and workforce based. The only one that's sort of maybe a little different is the language use, which was a challenging one. I remember last time in Ag and Eco, that strategy 26C.
Yeah, I might suggest a concise summary
Yeah.
in this kind of education or support type thing template that, you know, you can take from each subcommittee, for example, Public Health Task Force has the unique position of a clean slate. We're new. Everything we're suggesting and working on will be new in the climate action plan. So we've thrown a lot of things into a spreadsheet and see what sticks. And the one thing that we keep talking about is how can we continue to be healthy given climate change and its effect on people? All right, we're right at the people level and all the things that climate change is doing in key areas to, in effect, threaten us, things we have to deal with, things that are going to make us sick. And then we looked at how are we best communicating this to people. People need to know this. They need to know when there is bad air quality from wildfires. They need to know when E. coli counts are high before they go swimming again. People need to know things like vector-borne diseases. People need to know about COVID rates, et cetera. And we looked at how good of a job do we think we're doing now and where are we missing? And we've been identifying, I think we've got a lot that will eventually be consolidated into, I would say not more than 3 specific maybe entries in the spreadsheet or 1 with a narrative. And we've looked at things like getting the information to the people. We're looking a lot at mental health services. Where can we best serve those people needing the services? So we're looking at the regional health offices. And then we're looking at where do people go when they want to know something? Like if people are going to say, can we swim in the river today? Where are they going to go? Or, do you have COVID tests? Where are they going to go? They're going to call the town offices. And we need to be able to bring communication information on these things to the municipal. It's got to get down into the town level. And then we've got to look at underserved areas who don't have the internet capabilities that everybody else has. Maybe town staff is low, especially getting out to homeless, how we get out there, make sure they're being served with the kind of health services they need. So that's where we went with communication. What do we have now? What are we missing? What can we do better? And yeah, funding. We'd like more money, et cetera, for more hires to get out to do the mental health services and outreach to the least served communities or populations. So that's kind of how I see it. I mean, every, I'm not sure how to do another example, but that's how we've handled it. So we could contribute to a template like this and say, well, communication and education, we can, Waitsfield, it loves workshops. It loves to have things that the
Sure do.
Blue Farm and Valley Players and Big Picture when it was open. And it's got a vibrant front porch forum. So we've been looking at these.
Yeah, Alice, not to cut you off, but I
That's
do,
right.
I wonder if, like what you're already highlighting a gap in education, right? Like it does feel like what we have here is sort of like twofold, like land-based education that both promotes sort of the education of people who work on the land, and then also tools and incentives to help promote that. And then there's also a component around sort of language and communication around the way agency staff support materials. But there's a gap of not having, which we know already across the climate action plan, a gap around sort of public health education around the impacts from climate change. So I feel like there's probably, and I want to hear from others, so I'm going to just put something out there and say, I wonder what I was proposing before was that it does feel like most of these are focused and grounded in actual task group work right now. And there's probably themes or sort of buckets that we could be talking about, like education as a cross-cutting issue from these vantage points. So probably education needed around land-based education or around public health or whatever else it comes up as emerging issues. And maybe those emerging issues are really the way we want to be talking about education as a cross-cutting pathway, and not pulling specific strategies and actions out of their sector buckets, which is what this spreadsheet's done and did in the last plan. So rather put these back and talk about education from a themed perspective of where climate education is most needed. Melissa.
Sorry, I'm trying to pivot my comments based on what you just said, but and apologies, I didn't review this in detail before, but I'm realizing like there's a lot of depth and detail in these recommendations. So maybe this is consistent with what you're saying, Jane. I mean, they're very agriculture focused. And a lot of these recommendations could apply more broadly, but when you're talking about developing new curriculum in schools, et cetera, I mean, that you're getting pretty in the weeds. I was just gonna suggest that in the interest of time, we focus on the ones that are advancing or not having action taken, and do we, just as a first cut, even want to keep those in the conversation? And I think given the depth of what's here, I'd be very reluctant to add anything unless there was something that had been flagged by a subcommittee as missing. Essentially, let's like continue progress with what we've already got rather than adding new topics to the list. With the only caveat being the point I made at the beginning about navigators, and I see that actually is reflected here on Liz's spreadsheet as a new pathway. But yeah, I would say stick with what we have, eliminate anything that doesn't seem relevant, and leave it at that for this update. And I do support Jane essentially punting some of this back to the subcommittees where relevant.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think we have limited time. There's over 200 actions in the initial climate action plan. There's just a handful of them here. There's, you know, one from each of these pathways that this group thinks are important. We should move those along. If you want to just have Ag and Ecos do that entirely, since they probably originated from that subcommittee initially, we can certainly do that. And yeah, I would imagine like subcommittees like Rural Resilience are having conversations around communication at the municipal and regional level around the sort of planning and response that Alice was talking about, with all the benefit of seeing that work here and how it, you know, maybe feeds into what we're thinking about. So it would seem it seems like we should just set some priorities based on these, share them with the council, and if they see gaps or if we acknowledge gaps, we could flag those, but it's kind of their job to identify and pursue them in the final plan.
Sounds good. So just so I understand what, Melissa, you started by saying perhaps that a starting place could be looking at the ones that are not advancing and sort of just move those off.
Yeah, or even the advancing ones, like, are we good? Can we just check like advancing? Okay, we're going to claim success there. And really refine where the, you know, additional need is or existing need that hasn't been filled. sorry, I'm just not close to these, so a lot of them say advancing and I don't know what that means.
Just so you could go real quick to the definition tab, Liz, actually, because advancing still, it's the being implemented one is the one where we can sort of say like claim success and be done, I think. And the advancing and no action taken are the ones where we would either want to decide how we structure those. The advancing one is the one I found that, like, means so many different things to people. Like you could just be conceptually talking about an idea, or you could be in a planning phase, but not have resources yet.
So should we just go through the ones that are advancing and just either, yay or nay, this is still a priority, let's keep it on there?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right, so let's look at this first one.
That's a broad statement, but yes, it seems like a priority.
All right, so keep as is. Anyone disagree with that? And we'll do it that way. I'll do keep as is and then keep it open for any concerns. All right, next one. Increase funding to RPCs to hire and support national resource staff, potentially through natural resource conservation districts. Keep as is. Any concerns?
Doesn't feel like an education. That was what got me thinking about this, but I'm fine. I support that in concept.
We could put in the notes like, should this stay as education?
I mean, do you feel like
Um,
that, Billy, too? Like, it doesn't feel like an education action.
I think, yeah, I think the idea is that the RPCs are, a way to educate municipalities on some of the resources and kind of planning opportunities associated with resilience. But yeah, I think it doesn't have to be couched as education, certainly. It can be,
And incapacity.
yeah.
So go ahead.
Sophie, do you have
I'm not familiar with, like, sorry to like have an opinion on some of these. I'm gonna probably need some background and maybe need to do that offline, but, with this one, are those positions that already exist, or is this an action to say, create these new positions that have never existed before?
It varies from RPC to RPC.
Okay.
Yeah, some RPCs have natural resource planners, some don't. It's kind of inconsistent. That's sort of been there has been a lot of push and emphasis from certain parts of our agency to consistently fund that. So every RPC has a natural resource planner, and to do something similar to the way VTrans sort of funds and capacitizes transportation planners at all the RPCs. But there's not a consistent funding mechanism or support behind the scenes for natural resource planners.
Yeah. Liz, if you could scroll to the left a little bit. So I can see the full, yeah.
And
Cool.
the natural resource conservation districts, like, I'm not quite sure what that,
Yeah,
maybe I would just like, I don't know if people would support this, but I would maybe just recommend striking the potentially through natural resource conservation districts. And just have it as increased funding and maybe increased funding and support to RPCs to hire. Oh, it says to hire and support, but yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I work closely with our RPC's natural resource.
We have a
Yeah.
good one.
And I don't know what natural resource conservation districts are.
That we have districts and they have we have natural resource conservation districts across the state. They do different things. They don't
Okay.
feel linked to me to RPCs. So
Yeah.
I would just like get rid of that part. Unless anybody has an objection.
I wonder if there's some, more specificity in the language around, since Jane, you said there are some of these that already exist, maybe the action becomes more specific of, like, make sure that the RBCs that don't have this staff get them and that the funding has like a consistent and like clear mechanism, feels a little more specific to me than like how it currently is.
Does anyone else hear, like, Sophie has like a pretty
Yeah.
strong echo? It's really hard to understand you, Sophie, right now, so. Thanks. It's hard to have the funding conversation in isolation. There's so many actions that are gonna require money that whether this is a priority or not is hard to say. But, you know, I think having more planning capacity at RPCs for this work isn't a bad thing. Where for me, it ranks lower on this list than the first one or some of the other things, but that's just my own 2 cents.
Okay, so any concerns with that revision?
I bet it was like, just say, like, take away increased funding and say something like, support regional planning commissions to, I don't know, to fully capacitize all RPCs with natural resource staff. I don't know. It takes away the. Thanks, Katie. And you could just
Well-
call them natural resource planners, not staff, maybe. Because that's what their titles are at the RPCs.
Is everyone good with
And
that?
maybe, and just say
revision? Okay.
capacitize every RPC, because I don't know how many, but probably half of them have natural resource plan. There you go. Okay, but we made progress. That alone, look at that. We've written a new action. I don't even know why I'm speaking up. I have no role on any subcommittee or anything. I'm gonna let you guys keep talking.
Okay, and maybe we do like, I think limited time, we do one more and then talk about next steps for next meeting. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that works.
One more
Okay.
pathway.
Yeah, an advancing one.
Sorry, what was the one? That last one, do we get that? I think we missed that one. Oh, the being
Well, being
implemented.
implemented, we're gonna
We're
claim
just-
success,
Oh.
right?
Carry on. Okay. Phew.
Keep
I like-
as is. All right.
So, well, is it keep as is, or we're just like taking it away? That is what we're recommending.
I thought we were keeping even the ones that are like
That's what
completed
council
or
said,
being
but we can
implemented.
do what we want with it as a,
Yeah.
or a
Oh. Okay,
I had suggested taking them away before we even gave the spreadsheets to subcommittees. But
okay, so remove.
yeah, and maybe just
I'm-
make a note that we're,
Anyone?
oh, you go ahead, Billy, sorry.
I guess if the council said not to remove them, I don't know that we should. I think we can just say this is being implemented and should continue
Yeah,
to be implemented. That seems the simple way to do it.
Yeah, maybe we could just address it by sorting them, like all the being implemented at the bottom to really prioritize, but that can come at the end.
I'll come later. Okay. Does that sound good to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe I could squeeze in one more. Well, I guess anything about this path, maybe we should start looking at this pathway first before we dig into the actions and the strategies and actions.
I mean, I
Does
think I would
anyone
just
have
flag,
any concerns?
I'd love to hack workforce right off and let that be handled in the workforce
Okay.
group. And then maybe some of these strategies will fall under that
Yeah.
bucket.
And
Okay,
also
so let's
like to
revise.
promote shared understanding, like I don't even, that's just like floating in there. Just to have it be like create accessible, equitable research partnerships and education.
Great.
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that. We're leaving in for the working lands, natural and working land sector.
Should I leave it? I took that out. Should I?
I
Oh,
think
yeah,
if it's a cross-cutting pathway, we want to keep it broader.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Okay, then let's look at the strategy under that.
those
That's
seem redundant. Those two can be combined. The one we just did and this one we're looking at now.
there's like
26.
a strategy, although it doesn't really, I guess it's just about funding.
Yeah.
It's funny because the actions aren't really funding.
They're not all, yeah, they're not all funding, so maybe the strategy should be broader.
Yeah. So I would just say like provide for climate related education, like just strike the funding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's action here.
I mean, sure, it's a good action. I'm not sure who does that.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
like so cross-cutting it. Also, is my sound better
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds
on
much
here?
better. Thanks, Sophie.
Yeah, like like when I look at that, I'm like, that I think entirely encompasses my job and like every agency that's on the interagency advisory board. So is the action like that there could be multiple outreach and educational plans to be produced under this action. So it's good. It's just so huge that I feel like there's a couple steps in between of yeah, who's doing it and what's the plan for doing it and what's the goal. Um,
Why
Yeah.
don't we just say commendable, needs more detail to be implemented, something like that.
yeah, something like let's work on it and get a little more specific. We don't have to do that right now, but
Yeah.
I think just making a note to ourselves to make it actionable. Like as it is, it's a high level thing, but it's not actionable in and of itself.
Okay. All right. So we'll pick this up here when we come back together next week. And I want to leave time for public comment as well. Any members of the public want to make a comment? Thanks, Katie. Great. Okay.
And I
Um,
feel, I mean, I kind of feel like that now that we spent a half an hour sort of processing what we were doing here, that like, I don't know, like, is there something that Liz, or others can do to advance between now and the next meeting? Or do you guys want to feels like that just to pick up where we're at, where we left off and just finish it? Would
Yeah,
be,
I was wondering if I could just email some suggestions
yeah,
to Liz.
you're welcome to. You're also able to make comments directly on the document if you'd like, or you can
Yeah.
email me suggestions either way. But you're able to edit this using your partner email account.
Okay,
But yeah, I would make comments in the interim just before we meet again, and then we could pick it up then, or send me suggestions. Yeah.
you don't want me to put them directly into the spreadsheet, just make the comments. It's only,
I guess it's up to you all. I mean, I think it would just be easier to see before making any changes for your group, but that's just my thought.
like two, not many.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have specific real attachment to any of these actions, but I mean, I think if anyone, Liz or Sophie, or, you know, other members of the group wanted to suggest revised language in that column there and leave the old language, I mean, I think that would only move us forward. Like things where it's like clarify this or this would be more appropriate worded this way. I think, and I can try to take a cut at that too, but I can't make any promises. That at least would give us something to deal with at the next meeting.
that sounds great.
It's an interesting subject because there are other areas that I have been in meetings with, and the subject comes up all the time. We need to educate this group more. You know, so it's definitely a hot topic, one might say. A necessary topic.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you. Yeah, that's a really great plan. You could edit in the revised language and then we'll pick it up next week.
We'll get to it. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Next week.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks all.
Okay.
Have a nice day, guys.
You too.